For a moment the place was lifeless, and then two men emerged from the path and came into the opening by the green pool. They had walked in single file down the path, and even in the open one stayed behind the door. Both were dressed in denim trousers and in denim coats with brass buttons. Both wore black, shapeless hats, and both carried tight blanket rolls slung over their shoulders. The first man was small and quick, dark of face, with restless eyes and sharp, strong features. Every part of him was defined: small, strong hands, slender arms, a thin and bony nose. Behind him walked his opposite, a huge man, shapeless of face, with large, pale eyes, with wide, sloping shoulders, and he walked heavily, dragging his feet a little, the way a bear drags his paws. His arms did not swing at his sides, but hung loosely. The first man stopped short in the clearing, and the follower nearly ran over him. He took off his hat and wiped the sweatband with his forefinger and snapped the moisture off. His huge companion dropped his blankets and flung himself down and drank from the surface of the green pool, drank with long gulps, snorting into the water like a horse. The small man stepped nervously behind him. "Lenny," he said sharply. "Lenny, for God's sake, don't drink so much." Lenny continued to snort into the pool. The small man leaned over and shook him by the shoulder. "Lenny, you're gonna be sick like you was last night." Lenny dipped his whole head under, hat and all, and then he sat up on the bank and his hat dripped down on his blue coat and ran down his back. "That's good," he said. "You drink some. You take a good big drink." He smiled happily. George unslung his bindle, and dropped it gently on the bank. "I ain't sure it's good water," he said. "Looks kinda scummy." Lenny dabbled his big paw in the water and wiggled his fingers, so the water arose in little splashes. Rings widened across the pool to the other side and came back again. Lenny watched them go. "Look, George, look what I done." George knelt beside the pool and drank from his hand with quick scoops. "Tastes all right," he admitted. "Don't really seem to be running, though. You never ought to drink water when it ain't running, Lenny," he said hopelessly. "You drink out of a gutter if you was thirsty." He threw a scoop of water into his face and rubbed it about with his hand, under his chin and around the back of his neck. Then he replaced his hat, pushed himself back from the river, drew up his knees and embraced them. Lenny, who had been watching, imitated George exactly. He pushed himself back, drew up his knees, embraced them, looked over to George to see whether he had it just right. He pulled his hat down a little more over his eyes, the way George's hat was. George stared morosely at the water. The rims of his eyes were red with sun glare. He said angrily, "We could just as well have rode clear to the ranch if that bastard bus driver knew what he was talking about." "Just a little stretch down the highway," he says. "Just a little stretch." "God damn, near 4 miles, that's what it was. Didn't want to stop at the ranch gate, that's what. Too goddamn lazy to pull up. Wonder he isn't too damn good to stop in Soledad at all. Kicks us out and says, 'Just a little stretch down the road.' I bet it was more than 4 miles. Damn hot day." Lenny looked timidly over to him. "George?" "Yeah, what you want?" "Where we going, George?" The little man jerked down the brim of his hat and scowled over at Lenny. "So y'all forget that already, did ya? I'm gonna tell you again, do I? Jesus Christ, you're a crazy bastard." "I forgot," Lenny said softly. "I tried not to forget. Honest to God, I did, George." Okay, I'll tell you again. I ain't got nothing to do. Might just as well spend all my time telling you things and then you forget them and I tell you again. Tried and tried, said Lenny, but it didn't do no good. I remember about the rabbits, George. The hell with the rabbits. That's all you ever can remember is them rabbits, okay? Now, you listen and this time you gotta remember so we don't get in no trouble. You remember sitting in that gutter on Howard Street and watching that blackboard? Lenny's face broke into a delighted smile. Why, sure, George. I remember that. But what we do then? I remember some girls come by and you say, the hell with what I says. You remember about us going into Murray and Reddy's and they give us work cards and bus tickets? Oh, sure, George, I remember that now. His hands went quickly into his side coat pockets. He said gently, George, I ain't got mine. I must have lost it. He looked down at the ground in despair. You never had none, you crazy bastard. I got both of 'em here. Think I'd let you carry your own work card? Lenny grinned with relief. I thought I put it in my side pocket. His hand went into the pocket again. George looked sharply at him. What do you take out of that pocket? Ain't a thing in my pocket, Lenny said cleverly. I know there ain't. You got it in your hand. What you got in your hand? Hiding it? I ain't got nothing, George, honest. Come on, give it here. Lenny held his closed hand away from George's direction. It's only a mouse, George. A mouse? A live mouse? Uh-huh. Just a dead mouse, George. I didn't kill it. Honest, I found it dead. Give it here, said George. Aw, let me have it, George. Give it here. Lenny's closed hand slowly opened. George took the mouse and threw it across the pool to the other side among the brush. What you want of a dead mouse anyways? I could pet it with my thumb while we walked along, said Lenny. Well, you ain't petting no mice while you walk with me. You remember where we going now? Lenny looked startled and then in embarrassment hid his face against his knees. I forgot again. Jesus Christ, George said. Well, look, we're going to work on a ranch like the one we come from up north. Up north? In Weed. Oh, sure, I remember, in Weed. That ranch where we're going to is right down there, about a quarter mile. We're going to go in and see the boss. Now look, I'll give him the work tickets, but you ain't got to say a word. You just stand there and don't say nothing. If he finds out what a crazy bastard you are, you won't get no job. But if he sees you work before he hears you talk, we're set. You got that? Sure, George. Sure, I got it. Okay, go in to see the boss. What you gonna do? Lenny thought. His face grew tight with thought. I ain't gonna say nothing. Just gonna stand there. Good boy. That's swell. You say that over 2-3 times so you sure won't forget it. Lenny droned to himself softly. I ain't gonna say nothing. I ain't gonna say nothing. I ain't gonna say nothing. Okay, said George. And you ain't gonna do no bad things like you done in Weed neither. Lenny looked puzzled. Like I done in Weed? Oh, so you forgot that too, did ya? Well, fear you do it again. A light of understanding broke on Lenny's face. They run us out of Weed, he exploded triumphantly. Run us out, hell, said George disgustedly. We run. They was looking for us, but they didn't catch us. Lenny giggled happily. I didn't forget that, you bet. George lay back on the sand and crossed his hands under his head, and Lenny imitated him, raising his head to see whether he were doing it right. God, you're a lot of trouble, said George. I could get along so easy and so nice if I didn't have you on my tail. I could live so easy and maybe have a girl. For a moment, Lenny lay quiet, and then he said hopefully, "We're gonna work on a ranch, George." "All right, you got that? But we're gonna sleep here because I got a reason." The day was going fast now. Only the tops of the Gabalin mountains flamed with the light of the sun that had gone from the valley. A water snake slipped along on the pool, its, its head held up like a little periscope. The reeds jerked slightly in the current. Far off toward the highway, a man shouted something, and another man shouted back. The sycamore limbs rustled under a little wind that died immediately. "George, why ain't we gone to the ranch and get some supper?" "They got supper at the ranch." George rolled on his side. "No reason at all for you. I like it here."